Good morning. I'm Dorothy Velasco, and together we are going to do the responsive reading. Is God willing to prevent evil but not able? Is he able but not willing? Is he both able and willing? Is he neither able nor willing?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Renee Theriault, and I am not an atheist, but some of my best friends are. In fact, my dearly departed husband was an atheist, and he was the kindest, most generous, compassionate, and loving person I've ever known. I have a piece of writing by Ingersoll, a respected 19th century atheist, that was read at his memorial. Immortality, the idea of life after death, like a sea, has ebbed and flowed in the human heart with its countless waves of hope and fear beating against the shores of time and fate. That idea was not born of any book, creed, or religion. It was born of human affection, and it will continue to ebb and flow beneath the clouds of doubt and darkness as long as love survives death. It is the rainbow, a rainbow of hope shining upon the tears of grief.
Marilyn, Gary, and Betty. I appreciate that. I left all the music up to Marilyn to make sure, I just happened to see Heather back there, to make sure that at least one part of the service went well. I want to thank the Religious Services Committee for having me and Elizabeth for her help. Now, if any of you happen to fall asleep, don't worry about it. I do it all the time in the sanctuary, Fred's sermons, Jason's sermons, but never during Elizabeth's. As many of you may know, I consider myself an atheist. I'm sure at some point I believed when I was young, but as long as I can remember, I've been an atheist. That being said, I rarely admit I do not know what I believe to be true. Some people would say that means I'm an agnostic, but in my mind, then everybody would be an agnostic because nobody knows what's true. They just arrogantly think they do. Now, what I say this morning to you is what I believe. I'm not a biblical scholar. I'm not even biblically literate, truthfully. I've not studied the Bible or ancient religions. My friend James, he's fairly well read about these things. He'll tell you about all the religions and deities that preceded Christianity and how Christianity copied these. If you ask him over a few beers, he'll tell you rather loudly. If you ask him over several beers, he'll tell you very loudly. I can't speak of these things that he speaks of. I can only tell you what I know or what I believe, and what I believe is what I get from my own common sense. There's no dogma to atheism. All atheists have their own sets of beliefs and thoughts. All I can tell you is what I believe. But when I got online to do some research, looking up atheist quotes, I realized that there is a lot of commonality. Some of these people, I thought they're reading my mind with their quotes. Now, let me give you a little background on myself and how I got to where my beliefs are, where my thought process. When I was young, my family attended South United Methodist Church in Wyoming. My brother and I did not want to go, so we would stay in bed as long as we could, hoping that call to get ready for church didn't come. And the only times we had to go is if my father went. He went maybe on average every other week. Now my mother, she went every week. She was a devout believer. She sang in the choir for 50 years. My sister would go with her voluntarily. Can you believe that? A child going to church voluntarily. Me and my brother both knew my sister was strange. Now on Sundays, when I did go to church, I spent my time in Sunday school. There would be this chart on the wall with everybody's name and the stars on it for all the Bible lessons that they had completed. Mine might have 1 or 2 stars, but that was only when I copied from somebody else. I had absolutely no interest. Now when I was 10, Christmas Eve, 1970, we went to the Christmas Eve service. That was the last time my father went, so that was the last time I went. I thought for sure I would never attend another church service, and look where I'm at. There wasn't any single moment of revelation for me, any aha moment saying, okay, I'm an atheist. It was just kind of gradual. I remember when I was young, people saying, well, the universe never ends. And I thought to myself, that doesn't make sense. It has to end somewhere. But then logic also tells you there has to be something beyond it. Well, I took that same logic, applied it to God. People would say, well, look at this magnificent world we have. People and what we do, the animals and the plants and flowers and the oceans. Something had to create this. There had to be some thought behind it. And there's a certain compelling logic to that. But then I thought to myself, well, if there had to be a higher power that created us, there had to be some higher power that created that higher power. And on and on and on. So somewhere it had to just happen. And I believe that's where the earth came from. It just happened. Now, one point in time when I was young, I remember saying to somebody, some Christian, giving them this logic. And I said, where did God come from? What power created God? And I was told, well, that's not for us to question. We're just supposed to have faith and believe it. And I thought to myself, well, if there was this God that created us in these incredible brains that we hardly use, wouldn't he want us to use them and ask this question, where did he come from? But I didn't bring this point up. I wasn't self-assured enough at that point in my life. I was still young to argue my beliefs. It would take many years before I do that openly and easily. But I also remember thinking, if there was this God that was so powerful, why did his son have to die on the crucifix to absolve us of our sins? Couldn't he do that all on his own without having his son die on the crucifix? It didn't make any sense to me. Now, I spent a lot of years thinking that most people, even though they were Christian, didn't really believe in the Bible. They just spoke it, but inside they didn't believe it. But truthfully, I didn't really give a lot of thought to it. I thought, how could any intelligent person believe in the Bible? Ernest Hemingway said, all thinking men are atheists. But I never really talked to people that I knew about these things, about their thoughts. I just assumed they were all sane and didn't really believe in these things. Now, politicians would speak it all the time in their campaign trail, talking about their religion and their faith, but I thought to myself, again, they just had to be pandering to their base. I'd hope that people that were leading our country did not believe in these fairy tales. People responsible to educate our children, that led our schools, would use some reason and sense. But 8 years of Ronald Reagan started to change my assumptions. School boards started talking about outlawing the teaching of evolution and demanding that creationism was taught. This is something I thought had been settled long before I was born. Clarence Darrow and the Scopes monkey trial, I just thought this was a given, but apparently I was wrong. Robert Pirsig said, when one person suffers from a delusion, it's called insanity. When many people suffer from a delusion, it's called religion. I thought these people delusional. I thought them batshit crazy. I started to pay more attention to these things. I found out somewhere along the way, Oral Roberts, the famous television preacher, he got his start as a faith healer. And I thought, how can people follow this man that believed that he was healing people just by their faith, bringing people back from the dead? Pat Robertson making one outlandish statement after another. And people kept giving him money and following what he said. About the wrath of God being brought down upon us in these natural disasters because of the LGBTQ community. I was seeing there was a lot more influence and belief of things that I'd earlier thought were preached on us on Sunday mornings, but set aside the rest of the week. The religious right, they wanted to take this country to places I wasn't comfortable with. Remove evolution from schools, regulate women's health choices based on their beliefs and not the beliefs of the women, discriminate against those who lived their lives in ways they didn't agree with, even though these people did absolutely no harm to anyone else. They used the Bible and they used religion to justify this. They claimed the founders of this nation, even though the First Amendment says there needs to be a separation of church and state, founded this nation as a Christian nation. James Madison, one of our founding fathers, said, religious bondage shackles and debilitates the mind and unfits it for every noble enterprise, every expanded prospect. George Washington, the father of our country, I am persuaded you will permit me to observe that the path of true piety is so plain as to require but little political direction. To this consideration, we ought to ascribe the absence of any regulation respecting religion from the Magna Carta of our country. Thomas Jefferson, who wrote the Jefferson Bible, said, from the dissensions among the sects themselves arise necessarily a right of choosing and necessity of deliberating to which we will conform. But if we choose for ourselves, we must allow others to choose also. And so reciprocally, this establishes religious liberty. Now, these statements show me that this nation was founded with true religious liberty in mind and not with just religious liberty of Christians. Many of the things I've seen these people trying to do as destructive, as being harmful. I could not see any good in religion. I'm a big Bill Maher fan. He sees all religion as destructive and harmful at best and evil at worst. Voltaire said, "Those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities." Stephen Weinberg, with or without religion, you would have good people doing good things and evil people doing evil things. But for good people to do evil things, that takes religion. How many wars have been fought over religious differences? How many people have died? Now, many times I've heard people claim that without religion, there would be no morals, no morality. Now, I take great exception to this. I think my morals will stand up with most anyone's. I do have my faults like everyone else, but I consider myself to be a very moral person. Margaret Hack said, us atheist people, we believe we have to act properly and honestly for a moral principle, and not because we expect an award in paradise. In other words, when an atheist acts with morality, he does so without the hammer of eternal damnation hanging over his head. Now, I often wonder how Christianity, or any religion for that matter, got its start. Where did it come from? One of my theories is that some people created it and used it to give them power over others. In Christianity, it was used to create rules in which people believed other people should live. And they kept the common man from reading the Bible for hundreds of years, being able to determine for themselves what the Bible said and what it meant to them, until Martin Luther deciphered it. Until then, they had to take what the church and the priest said as gospel. Now, another less insidious theory is that man needed a way to explain the unexplainable. How did we get here? How did this world with all its wonders come to be? What happened to us when we died? I think this is where all the Greek gods and the Roman gods came from, trying to answer these questions. I went to see a movie one day, 6 or 7 years ago. It's called Invention of Lying. I don't know if any of you have seen it. It was Ricky Gervais. And in this world that they lived in, there was no such thing as lying. And one day, Ricky Gervais got a call, his character got a call from the hospital. His mother was there. She was dying. So he went to see her on her deathbed. And she says to her son, "What's going to happen to me when I die? I'm afraid. I'm scared. I don't want to die." So to ease her fears and help ease her into this transition, he made up a story. He told her of this fantastic place she was going to go to live, where everybody was happy, this blissful world she would live in. She would go there and find her parents and everybody that had died before her that she had loved. In other words, he made up heaven. Gods, I believe, were created to explain the unexplainable and to ease people's minds. Say that there's a greater good and somebody watching over us. It's not all on us. Now, earlier this year, I was out to dinner with the singles group, and I got a phone call from my sister. My mother was dying. So I went to the nursing home where she was living. I was there with my sister, my brother, and my brother's wife, my nieces, and my father. And we sat there 5-6 hours as my mother, unconscious, as she lay there dying. Now, most of that time, either my sister or my sister-in-law would be sitting at her side, holding her hand, talking to her, telling her how she was going to go see her mother and her father and all her brothers and sisters that had died before her. And I sat there listening to this, wanting to believe. I wanted that for her, but I could not bring myself to believe that that was going to happen, not even for my mother. This is an instance where I hope I'm wrong. Some years ago, when I proclaimed my atheism to my family, both my mother and sister, two of the most loving women I know, told me I'm going to go to hell. Now, they didn't say it with disdain or animosity. They were just stating what they believed to be fact. My mother told me she was disappointed I would not be with her in heaven. One day at work, about 20 years ago, I walked into my boss's office, and he was having a discussion with one of our coworkers about some passage in the Bible. I have no idea what it was. And he looked to me and asked me, told me what they were talking about. I said, don't you believe that's so? Want me to agree with his point? And I looked at him and I said, I don't believe in the Bible. And he shut up and never talked to me about the Bible again. I started to realize there was some power to this. I started to become a little bit more open and honest with my beliefs with others. A few years later, I was at the break table again at work, and somehow we were having a discussion about religion. And again, I stated I'm an atheist. And one of my coworkers, who I assumed was non-religious, I don't know why I did that, but I did. And I said something to the effect of this, and he took great offense with me that I said that. And I realized a lot of people that I knew, who I assumed were not religious, were people of strong faith. That same day, another coworker said to me after I proclaimed my atheism, don't you think you should believe just in case? I said, no, it doesn't really work that way. This was about the time where my thoughts on Christians and Christianity started to evolve. Good people I never gave any thought to what their beliefs were, I began to realize were believers, people of strong faith. There was a salesman I used to deal with. He'd come in once a week, Monday mornings, and we'd talk maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes about business and then sit and talk another hour or so about whatever it is, was news of the day or whatever, just life in general. And one day, somehow the subject came up with somebody who believed literally in the Bible. And I probably spent 5 minutes, maybe 10, mocking this person because they believed literally in the Bible. And Pete Vandersloot sat there listening, smiling. And as I got done, he said, I believe literally in the Bible. And he didn't take any offense at what I said. He was fine. But I realized that here Pete was, he's very intelligent, a very good person, a very good man, a good father. People could actually believe literally in the Bible and be intelligent people. This really blew my mind. So my thoughts and perceptions began to change. In the fall of 2008, I had just finished up my first Connections group, and that was with Matthew Conkrum. And just after that ended, I got an email from Matthew about a discussion series similar to Connections group being started at WMAC, West Michigan Environmental Action Council. And it was about how churches were dealing with climate change. So that interested me. So I signed up for it and I went. When I got there the first night, Kathy Higgins, who's speaking in a few weeks, 3 or 4, it's a can't miss event, you want to be here. And Barb Hoopdirk were there, both from the Connections meeting I was in. We got there. We went into the room where the meeting was being held, and there was a nun standing there. I found out she is going to lead the group, Sister Lucille. So we sat down. First thing we did, everybody went around introducing themselves, what church, where do you come from? And there were some people from Christian Reformed churches in very conservative areas. So I'm sitting here with a nun leading this group with Christian Reformed people. I'm thinking, this is not going to go good for me. I'm just not going to fit in. First thing we did in that first meeting, once we introduced ourselves, Sister Lucille showed a PowerPoint presentation. He started out talking about how the earth was 5 billion years old. And I'm sitting here with a nun talking about how the earth is 5 billion years old, and I thought, this is not the nun I was expecting. I've never been Catholic, so I haven't had a lot of dealings with nuns, but this was not what I was expecting. So we went through the first meeting. Again, I was really impressed by this woman, Sister Lucille. The second meeting, we were having a discussion, and again, I don't know what I was talking about at the time, but I mentioned the fact I'm an atheist. I was expecting gasps. I was expecting these Christian reformers to pull out their cross and try to ward me off. Nothing. They listened to what I said, respected what I said, and I was shocked, I was amazed, and I was pleased. Again, this started to change my thoughts of Christians and Christianity. These people were accepting, had nothing bad to say, and valued my thoughts and ideas. A few years after that, Social Action Committee meeting, Lisa and Jacob signed the church up to have a booth at Pride Fest. And I volunteered to set the booth up and man it and kind of be in charge of it. So that this Pride Fest, this is when it was still out at Riverside Park. So I got out there, set up the tent. I believe, Eric, you helped me that morning. And as I was walking around that event that day, I realized there were countless other churches that had booths there. These were Christian churches, had booths at Pride Fest, openly accepting gays, their lifestyles, welcoming them with love. Rob Bell said, "The danger is that in reaction to abuses and distortions of an idea, we'll reject it completely, and in the process, miss out on the good of it, the worth of it, the truth of it. Even though I don't believe in the Bible, and I don't agree with Christian faith," this is me now, not Rob Bell, "I have to admit, at this point, a lot of good can come from it. People with strong faith can get a lot of positives from their beliefs and their faith. I see it as kind of a placebo effect, the power of positive thinking. People can use it to get through hard times, struggles with addiction, depression, losses. My views have changed. Christianity can be used in a lot of negative ways. People like the Reverend Fred Phelps, who preaches discrimination at funerals of service members. People like Pat Robertson, who blames natural disasters on the perceived sins of those he doesn't agree with. But it also can be used in a lot of positive ways, helping people find strength in themselves. Now, I invoke God's name often. Most often in damnation when I'm watching the Tigers and the Lions. I was tempted to add the subtitle to this sermon, "and many other fairy tales." Now, I do believe, I call the Bible a fairy tale and Christianity a fairy tale, but there are a lot of good that can come from it. I still think people that believe in the literal word of the Bible are batshit crazy, but people can use it for good. People can use Christianity for good in their faith. It can have strong positive effects on people and strong positive effects on the world around us. Thank you.